Well, good morning and happy Pride. It is a joy to be with you. For those who do not know me, my name is Jimmy Moore, and I once had the honor of being the pastor here, and it is always a great joy for me when I'm able to be back. Carolyn said I could not speak for more than 45 minutes, so we'll try to honor that as best we can. We may not make it, though. I do want to bring greetings from Julie, my wife. She, as many of you know, has dementia, and large gatherings are not her favorite thing these days, but she sends her love, and this is a very special place for her. Thank you. Methodist pastors serve usually more than one church, and most of us, whether we would admit it or not, have some places that are more dear to us than others. Would you agree with that, Beth? Yes, okay. Julie and I don't talk about this a lot, but we have several places that are special to us. The first place I ever tried to be a pastor in charge of anything was at the Trinity United Methodist Church in Claremont, Georgia, which is in northern Hall County between Gainesville and Cleveland, Georgia. And when we were there were a lot of dairy farms in that area, so that was one of the big economic elements of that region at that time. Our daughter Allison was born while we were in Claremont and was baptized at the Trinity Church. When we left Claremont, Allison could not understand why the cows that were in the pasture behind the parsonage could not go with us, because they were her cows and that they should go. But Trinity is one of those places that's very special to us, very special people. Always on that list for us of places that are important and special and dear to our heart is the St. Mark United Methodist Church. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One of them is that you were always so kind to us. And that started at the very beginning of my appointment here. Like some of my other moves, my time here began with a mid-year appointment. My official start date was January 1st, 2003. My first Sunday was supposed to have been the 5th of January. My daughter had a long-standing date to be married on the 4th of January. And somebody at St. Mark was gracious enough to look at those dates and say, you ought to wait and not come to preach until the 12th of January. So right out of the chute was this gift to us so that we could enjoy that wedding weekend without worrying about having to preach the next day. I can remember so many other things. My son Josh, right after we moved to this community, joined the Army and wound up going to Afghanistan. He surprised us one Sunday by coming unannounced to see us on leave. We had no idea he was coming, and he came to this church on Sunday morning. If you go over to the other building and listen carefully, I think you can still hear Julie's cries of joy echoing through the halls over there when she saw her son, and we were just overjoyed. But I will never forget, we were singing a hymn, and Julie and Josh came walking down this aisle to take a seat here, and this church, of course, sings great, one of the things I love about it, but the hymn got a little bit softer because it's hard to sing when you're crying, and the people in the choir and in the congregation, they didn't know Josh well, but they loved him, they loved us, and I have that memory etched in my mind. It's a very powerful memory. When we left, we got a book that says, Jimmy and Julie Moore, the St. Mark Years. This has a prominent place on a table in our living room right by the front door of our house because it's so special to us and you are so special to us. But it's not just because you were kind to us that we have cherished this church. This is a church that's been in significant ministry over the years to all kinds of folks. When I came to St. Mark was going through one of its times of turmoil and upheaval. It had been without a senior pastor for about 6 months, and so there was a lot going on. But what I found was all kinds of things. I found a staff that was gifted and creative and committed to the life and ministry of this church. I found lay people that were talented and committed to the life and ministry of this church, and were beginning to find their voice in terms of ministry and to discover that it's not all about just the senior pastor. We have a role to play in this as well. I found creative worship. I found outstanding music in the choir and in the singing. I was talking to a choir director in another church one day about the anthem, "He Never Failed Me Yet," and I'm so glad we're singing that this morning. And I was just saying how great St. Mark did with that anthem. And he said, "Well, you know, we sing that too, and we do all right with that." And I said, "Well, yeah, you do." What I didn't say but wanted to say was, "But have you ever heard St. Mark do that? Have you heard, where'd Phil go? Have you ever heard Phil rocking out on the piano on that? Have you ever heard those magnificent soloists that St. Mark has? Have you heard the choir just rocking and rolling when they get to singing that and the Spirit's moving? There is nowhere that does that hymn or that anthem, in my judgment, like the St. Mark United Methodist Church choir. It's a good one. I found a church that was committed to the decades-long commitment that was here before the miracle on Peachtree Street of ministering to the unhoused and the hungry in this neighborhood. And this was a church that was continuing that kind of focus and continues that today. You work so powerfully with suffering people in this community. I found a church that was committed to the full inclusion of LGBTQ plus folks in the church, even when the church made that so difficult and so hard across the years. I found people who loved Jesus and who worked to be the church, even when the larger church sometimes said, "We're not quite sure where there's a place for you," but I found a group of people who were committed to Christ and committed to the work of the church, and it was inspiring. I found a group of people who did their best to live out the commandment of Jesus, to love God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, mind, body, and spirit, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And it was inspiring. We had our troubles. It was not always smooth. St. Mark is known for its drama sometimes, and we had some of that, but it was a wonderful experience for me. I was thinking earlier this week when I was trying to think what I would want to say, thinking about what Paul says to some of the churches in his letters in the New Testament. And I ran across this one verse from Ephesians, the first chapter, the 15th verse. "I have heard of your faith in the Lord Jesus and of your love toward all the saints. And for this reason, I do not cease to give thanks for you as I remember you in my prayers." And I would just say to you that it was my high honor to have been the pastor of this church for a season, and it is my joy to be with you today as we celebrate Pride Sunday. Thank you for letting me be with you this morning. And,